A strange case, a missing thumb, and a deadly secret. Sherlock Holmes will uncover it all. During those years when we collaborated very closely, among the cases that Sherlock Holmes had to solve, there were exactly 2 instances where I introduced clients to his remarkable talents. The first was the Hatherley thumb case, and the second was Colonel Warburton's madness. Of these 2 cases, for those with a unique and keen sense of reasoning, the latter was more worthy of study. However, the former began in such a strange manner, with circumstances full of drama, that perhaps it deserves to be recorded more, even though in this case my friend had less need to use the superior reasoning powers he typically employed to solve previous cases. I believe this case has been published in the press more than once. Yet, like all reports of this kind, the writer used only half a page to publish the story briefly and superficially, which certainly cannot attract attention. Therefore, it's better to let the matter gradually unfold before your eyes, along with new discoveries that will help everyone understand more about the true nature of the entire incident. Thus, the mystery of the case will be decoded step by step. The scene at that time left an extremely deep impression on me. Even though time has passed, 2 full years have gone by, I can still remember almost every detail clearly. Now, I will get to the main part of the story, which happened in the summer of 1889, not long after I got married. At that time, I returned to medical practice, leaving Holmes alone in the house on Baker Street, though I still frequently visited him, sometimes even advising him to abandon his free-spirited lifestyle and come visit us. My work was increasingly prospering. Fortunately, we moved to a new place not far from Paddington Station, and there were already some railway employees and local residents among my regular patients. Because I had cured one of them of a chronic disease that had troubled him for so long, he did not hesitate to promote my medical skills everywhere, trying to persuade those he could to come to me for treatment. One morning, around 7 o'clock, I was awakened by the maid knocking on my door, saying that 2 people from Paddington had arrived and were in the waiting room. I hurriedly got dressed and went downstairs immediately. From experience, I knew that people who came by train usually had serious conditions, so I rushed down. My friend, the railway policeman I had mentioned, stepped out of the examination room and closed the door behind him. I brought him here. He pointed his thumb backward, whispering, "He's much better now." "What is it?" I asked, as his gesture made me feel as if he was keeping a monster in my room. "A new patient," he whispered again. "I thought it best to personally escort him here, or he might fall. Now I must go, doctor. Like you, I still have duties. He's now safely in there." With that, not even giving me time to thank him, that faithful mediator left immediately. I went into the examination room and saw a man sitting by the table. He was quite simple, wearing a gray tweed suit with a soft hat placed on my books. One of his hands was wrapped in a blood-stained handkerchief. He was very young, not over 25, with handsome features. But looking at his deathly pale complexion, I had the impression that he was using all his willpower and strength to fight the pain from a very severe shock. "I sincerely apologize, doctor, for waking you up so early," he said. "During the night, I encountered an extremely serious accident. Early this morning, I came here by train. When at Paddington Station asking where to find a doctor, a very enthusiastic person directed me here. I gave my business card to your maid, and I see she placed it on the table beside you. I picked up the business card and quickly read, Victor Hatherley, hydraulic engineer, 16A, 3rd floor, Victoria Street. That was the name, profession, and address of my visitor. "I'm sorry to have kept you waiting so long," I said as I sat down in the armchair. "I see you're still very alert despite having been on the train all night. I understand that night train journeys are always very monotonous and boring." "Ah, tonight can't be described as monotonous or boring," he said, and burst into laughter. A high-pitched and resonant laugh. He leaned back in his chair, his body shaking with laughter that wouldn't stop. This laugh, based on my medical knowledge, suddenly made me sense something very serious. "Stop laughing!" I shouted. "Sit still now!" Then I lifted the jug and poured him a glass of water, but it didn't help much, because after an uncontrollable fit of laughter, when the crisis passed, he gradually returned to normal. At this moment, as if suddenly awakened, exhausted, his face was pale. "How embarrassing! I've been acting silly," he panted as he tried to complain. "It's nothing. Drink this." I mixed some brandy into the water and passed it to him. His pale cheeks began to regain their color. "Much better," he said. "Now would you please examine my thumb, or rather, what used to be my thumb?" He removed the handkerchief and raised his hand. This sight would terrify even those with nerves of steel. 4 fingers protruded beside a soft, slimy piece of flesh, horrifyingly red with blood. That was where the thumb had been. It had been chopped off or torn from the hand. "Good Lord!" I exclaimed. "The wound is very serious. You must have lost a lot of blood." "Yes, exactly. After being injured, I fainted, and I think I was unconscious for quite a while. When I regained consciousness, seeing that blood was still flowing, I immediately used my handkerchief to bandage it tightly like this." "Good bandaging. You should have been a surgeon." "Well, this is a matter of hydraulics within my professional knowledge." "This wound must have been caused by a very sharp and heavy tool," I said as I examined the wound. "Like a meat cleaver," he agreed. "I assume this was an accident, wasn't it?" "Certainly not." "What? Someone deliberately acted brutally toward you?" Extremely brutal indeed. Oh, how terrifying." I softened, cleaned, and dried the wound, applied medicine, and finally bandaged it with antiseptic gauze. He lay still there, although in great pain but not moving, occasionally clenching his teeth, making them creak. "How do you feel now?" I asked when I finished. "Oh, wonderful. Your strong alcohol and bandages have made me feel like a completely different person. My health was indeed very weak, but purpose forces me to overcome, as I still have much to do. It's best not to mention that matter. Don't strain your nerves any further." "Oh, no. Not now. I still need to report this to the police, but I won't hide from you. If I didn't have this wound as evidence, it would be strange if they believed me, because this is a most unusual story, and I have no evidence to prove I'm telling the truth. Moreover, even if they believe me, the clues I can provide are very vague. Whether they will obtain justice for me is still a question." "Aha!" I exclaimed. "If that is the troublesome issue you really want to solve, then I am very willing to introduce you to my friend Sherlock Holmes. Before you go to the police, seek his help first." "Is that so?" "I have heard of him." My visitor agreed immediately. "I would be very pleased if he took on this case, and I must also report to the police. Can you introduce me to him?" "Not just introduce, I will personally take you to meet him. Then I am immensely grateful to you, Doctor. Let's call a carriage and go together. We can still have breakfast with him. Would that be all right?" "Yes. Until I can tell this story, I cannot be at peace." "Then let my maid call a carriage. I'll be right back." I hurried upstairs, briefly explained to my wife in a few words. 5 minutes later, I was neatly dressed and sitting in a carriage, with my new acquaintance heading straight to Baker Street. As I had anticipated, Sherlock Holmes was in his nightclothes, sluggishly walking around the room, reading the seeking persons' obituaries. Published in The Times, with a pipe in his mouth before breakfast. That pipe contained all the tobacco remnants from the previous day, which filled a corner of the fireplace. He welcomed us with his uniquely friendly yet calm manner. Then he promptly ordered ham and eggs to be brought, invited us to eat in a very friendly way. After eating, he asked our new friend to lie on the sofa, placed a pillow under his head, and even personally prepared a glass of brandy for him. "It's very easy to see that your story is not at all ordinary, Mr. Hatherley," Holmes said. "For God's sake, lie down here, make yourself comfortable, don't be hesitant. If you feel strong enough, tell us everything you've just experienced. When you start to feel tired, take a short rest, Take a sip of alcohol to recover." "Thank you," my patient replied. "But after the doctor bandaged me, I feel like a different person. And I believe your breakfast has almost completed the treatment. I will try to take as little of your valuable time as possible, so I will begin to recount my strange story right now." Holmes sat in the armchair, appearing listless, concealing his sharp eyes and eager mood. I sat opposite, silently listening to the strange story that the visitor was recounting in great detail. "Gentlemen," he began in a deep, resonant voice, "I am an orphan and still single, living alone in a boarding house in London. As for my profession, I have studied to become a hydraulic engineer, and after 7 years working for a renowned company called Venner and Matheson in Greenwich, I have gained quite a lot of useful professional experience. 2 years ago, when my poor father passed away, I inherited a small amount of capital, so I decided to start my own business. I rented a place for an office on Victoria Street. Anyone would surely recognize that starting an independent business is difficult and discouraging. This was especially true for me. Over 2 full years, I received only 3 consulting contracts and conducted 1 insignificant job. That's all my profession could bring me. My total income was £27 and 10 shillings. Day after day, from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., I would sit waiting in my tiny office until my spirits were completely worn down, only to finally learn that one should never try this approach again. However, yesterday, just as I was about to leave the office, my assistant came in to announce that a gentleman wished to see me. He arrived late, due to business matters, and handed me a business card printed with the name Colonel Lysander Stark. This man was of moderate height but extremely thin. I don't think I've ever met anyone as thin as he was. On that gaunt face, his nose and chin protruded, the skin tightly stretched over his bony cheeks. But his emaciated appearance was likely congenital rather than due to any illness, as his eyes were bright, his movements lively, and his demeanor decisive. He dressed simply and neatly. I estimated him to be around 40 years old. "Mr. Hatherley?" he asked with a German-accented tone. "Mr. Hatherley, I've been told that you are not only skilled in your profession, but also very cautious and know how to keep secrets." I bowed. Like many other young people, I cynically asked myself, "Heavens, where did all these fine qualities come from?" "Oh, perhaps it's better if I don't tell you. From a source, I also know that you're an orphan and live alone in London." "That's correct," I replied, "but forgive me, these things don't affect my working abilities at all. I understand you've come here to discuss business with me, is that right?" "The matter isn't exactly like that, but you'll see that I don't waste words on anything unnecessary. We do indeed have a job that requires your help, but it must remain secret. Absolutely secret, do you understand? Of course, we hope that a single man will keep secrets better than someone living with family and children." "You can trust me completely," I said firmly. "If I promise to keep a secret, I will certainly do so." As I spoke, his eyes stared intensely at me. I had almost never seen such a scrutinizing and suspicious gaze. Finally, he asked again, "So you promise?" "Yes, I promise to keep the secret, before, during, and throughout the entire working process. All right? You will maintain absolute silence. Absolutely no mention of this matter, either spoken or written?" "I've already promised you." "Very well, then." Suddenly, he jumped up, rushed out, and slammed the door. There was not a soul in the passage outside. "Good," he said as he came back in. "I know that assistants are sometimes curious about their employer's business. Now we can talk safely." He pulled his chair close to mine, then again stared at me with those probing, suspicious eyes. The strange behavior of this skinny man made me feel a sense of aversion, almost fear. Even the worry of losing a client couldn't force me to be more patient. "Please speak about your matter," I urged impatiently. "My time is very valuable." May God forgive my next statement, but honestly, those words just slipped out. "Would 50 guineas for 1 night's work be acceptable to you?" he asked in response. "Certainly not insignificant." I say one night's work, but in reality it might only require an hour. I simply want to consult you about a slipped cog in a hydraulic press. You just need to identify what's damaged, and we'll quickly repair it ourselves. What do you think? The work seems very light, and the payment quite generous. We'd like you to come on the last train tonight. To where? To Iford in Berkshire. It's a small area bordering Oxfordshire, less than 7 miles from Reading. There's a train from Paddington that will get you there around 11:15 p.m. Very good. I'll meet you at the station. So, we need to travel a bit further by carriage. Yes, our area is in the countryside, about 7 miles from Iford Station. Then we won't arrive before midnight. I guess I won't be able to catch a return train, so I'll have to spend the night there. Yes, we'll arrange accommodation for you. That's not very convenient. Can't we go at some more suitable time? We've determined that it's best for you to come at night. It's precisely to compensate for the inconveniences you'll face that we're paying so much to a young man without reputation like yourself. This price would be enough to consult the most excellent person in your profession. Of course, if you want to decline this business opportunity, there's still time. I thought about the 50 guineas and how useful that money would be for me. Oh, I didn't mean that, I said. I'm very willing to follow your wishes. However, I'd still like to know a bit more clearly what exactly you want me to do. Yes, we've asked you to ensure secrecy, which must have aroused your curiosity. We don't intend to make you do something without telling you about it beforehand. I want to be absolutely certain there's no one eavesdropping. Absolutely no one. Well then, here's the situation. Perhaps you know that the clay found there is an extremely rare mineral. In England, it has only been discovered in 2 places. I've heard about it. Not long ago, I bought a very small piece of land somewhere less than 10 miles from Reading. I fortunately discovered that on this land there is a very valuable clay deposit. However, after investigation, I found that this deposit is quite small and connects to 2 much larger deposits on 2 adjacent pieces of land owned by neighbors. But those honest people don't know that there's a mineral as valuable as gold hidden in their land. Naturally, I need to quickly buy these properties before they discover the true value of their land to get a good price. Unfortunately, I'm short on money. Therefore, I gathered some friends and told them about this secret. They suggested that we should quietly and secretly exploit the small deposit first, and by this method gradually accumulate enough money to buy the neighbor's land. Until now, we have been proceeding in this way for some time. To make the work more efficient, we installed a hydraulic press, as I mentioned at the beginning. This machine suddenly started malfunctioning, and we hope to get professional guidance from you. We guard this secret very carefully. If anyone were to know that we've invited a hydraulic engineer, it would only arouse people's curiosity. Then the truth would certainly be revealed. Our opportunity to acquire the land and our plans would come to nothing. That is the reason why I want you to promise not to tell anyone about your visit to Iford tonight. I hope I've made everything clear and you feel comfortable. I understand, I said. There's only one thing I'm not quite clear about. What does a hydraulic press have to do with extracting clay? As far as I know, extracting clay is similar to extracting sand and gravel from a pit. Ah, we have our own method. We compress the clay into bricks so that when transported it won't be revealed what they are. But that's just a minor detail. You'll soon know the whole secret, Mr. Hatherley, and as you can see, I trust you, he said as he stood up. So, 11:15 at Iford, agreed? I will certainly be there. Absolutely no one must know. Finally, he stared at me for a long time, with those doubting eyes. Then he extended his cold, damp hand to shake mine, and hurried out of the room. Afterward, as you both can imagine, when I calmed down and considered the whole matter thoroughly, I felt extremely surprised by the trust they had placed in me. On one hand, I was very pleased, because if I had set my own price for this task, it would certainly have been 10 times lower than the generous payment they offered. Moreover, this assignment could potentially lead to more work in the future. On the other hand, the attitude and appearance of that visitor had left me with a rather unpleasant impression. I felt that his explanation about the valuable clay was insufficient to prove that I absolutely had to go at night, nor convincing enough as to why he was so worried, so fearful that I might tell others. Nevertheless, I suppressed all my worries and fears, ate a hearty dinner, then took a cab to Paddington and began to strictly fulfill my assigned mission, keeping my mouth shut. At Reading, I not only had to change trains, but also stations. However, I managed to catch the last train to Eyford. After 11 o'clock, the train arrived at that small and gloomy station. I was the only passenger to disembark. Apart from a railway worker holding a lantern with a tired demeanor, the platform was completely deserted. However, when I left the ticket gate, I saw the man from this morning waiting for me in a dark area without lighting. Without saying a word, he grabbed my hand and pulled me toward a carriage with the door already open. He closed the windows on both sides, tapped on the side of the carriage, and the horse pulled us away swiftly. "Only one horse?" Holmes suddenly interrupted. "Yes, just one. Did you observe its color?" "Yes. Through the light when entering the carriage, I saw it was a chestnut horse. Did the horse look tired or energetic?" "Oh, it was very healthy with a glossy coat. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting when the story was getting interesting. Please continue." So from departure, the carriage had been traveling for at least an hour. Colonel Lysander Stark said it was only 7 miles, but I felt that with the speed and the time elapsed, it must have been nearly 12 miles. Throughout the journey, he sat silently beside me. A couple of times I caught him staring intently at me. It seemed the country roads there weren't very good, as our carriage shook and jolted terribly. I tried my best to look outside, wanting to see where we were, but the windows were foggy, so apart from some dim lights as we passed by, I couldn't see anything at all. Occasionally, I said a few words to break the tedium of the journey, but the colonel only responded curtly, so we didn't talk much. Finally, after the rough patches of road, the carriage moved onto a smoother, brighter, stone-paved path and then stopped. Colonel Lysander jumped out of the carriage, I followed, and he suddenly pulled me into a covered gateway with an open door. It seemed we had barely stepped out of the carriage when we entered a hall. As soon as we crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me. I vaguely heard the sound of wheels rolling as the carriage departed. It was pitch dark inside, and the colonel fumbled for matches, grumbling with irritation. At this moment, a door at the other end of the hallway suddenly opened. A long beam of yellow light shone toward us, growing brighter. Then suddenly, a woman appeared, holding a lamp raised before her face. She stretched forward, staring intently at us. I could see clearly that she was very beautiful. The light illuminated her black dress, and from the reflection, I could tell it was the luxurious fabric that wealthy ladies often wore. She said a few words in a foreign language, seemingly asking something. When my companion responded curtly and irritably, she was very surprised and nearly dropped the lamp in her hand. Colonel Stark went over to her, whispered something in her ear, and then pushed her back into the room she had come from. Then he took the lamp and walked toward me. "You may have to wait in this room for a few more minutes," he said, and opened another door. This was a small and quiet storage room with a round table in the middle, cluttered with several German books. Colonel Stark placed the lamp on top of a bookshelf. "I won't keep you waiting long," he said, then disappeared into the darkness. I looked through the books on the table. Although I don't understand much German, I could recognize that 2 of them were science books, and the rest were poetry. Then I looked toward the window, hoping to see some countryside scenery. But sturdy oak shutters blocked the window completely. The room was strangely silent. A clock somewhere in the hallway was ticking, tick-tock, tick-tock. Besides that, everything was as silent as a tomb. A vague feeling of unease gradually came over me. Who were these Germans? Why had they chosen this remote countryside to reside in, and what were they up to? Where was I? I only knew this place was about 10 miles from Aford, but I couldn't tell in which direction, east, west, north, or south. Geographically speaking, there might be other towns within that radius of Reading, so this place probably wasn't too remote. Yet it was so quiet here, I could definitely affirm we were in the countryside. I paced back and forth in the room, softly, humming a tune to boost my courage, and realized I had come here solely for the 50 guineas of payment. Suddenly, the door of the room burst open, though I hadn't heard any sound beforehand. The girl from earlier stood at the door, with darkness behind her. The dim yellow light from my room illuminated her beautiful and urgent face. Just a glance, and I immediately saw her panic and fear, a sight that chilled me to the bone. She raised a finger to signal me not to speak, then quickly said a few broken English sentences to me, her eyes darting anxiously into the darkness behind her like those of a young horse in distress. "You must run away. There's nothing good for you to do here," she said. She seemed to be trying to calm herself. "But miss, I haven't yet done the work I need to. I can only leave after I've examined the machine. It's not worth waiting for," she continued anxiously. "You can leave through this door. There will be no guard." When she saw me smile and shake my head, she suddenly dropped all caution, stepped forward, and clasped her hands tightly together. "For God's sake," she whispered. "There's still time. Escape now." But I am, naturally, very stubborn. When faced with difficulties in my work, I become even more determined. I thought about the payment, the tiring journey, and the not-so-pleasant evening unfolding before me. Why should I leave and waste everything? Why not fulfill the task entrusted to me and receive the deserved payment instead of sneaking away? From everything I had seen, perhaps she wasn't very sound of mind. So, although her attitude affected me strongly, I still firmly shook my head, indicating I wanted to stay and do what needed to be done. Just as she was about to plead with me, again, there was suddenly a clear sound of a door closing from upstairs, followed by footsteps coming down the stairs. The girl listened for a moment, then raised her hands in despair, and just as she had appeared, suddenly vanished silently. Colonel Lysander Stark and a short, fat man with a disorganized brown beard on his cleft chin entered. The colonel introduced him to me as Mr. Ferguson. "This is my secretary and manager," the colonel said. "By the way, I remember I closed the door earlier. I was worried that a draft might come in which wouldn't be good for you." "Quite the contrary," I replied. "I opened the door because I found this room a bit stuffy." He looked at me with suspicion. "Then let's get straight to work. Mr. Ferguson and I have prepared to take you upstairs to examine the machine. I think I should put on my hat." "Oh, that's not necessary. We're just inside this house." "What? Do you extract clay inside the house?" No. This is just where we press the raw bricks, but that's not important. We just need you to inspect the machine a bit and tell us what's wrong with it." We went upstairs together, with the colonel carrying the lamp in front and the short, stout manager and I following. I was in a maze of an old house with many corridors, countless intersections, a very narrow spiral staircase, and small, low doors. All the thresholds had been worn down by the footsteps of many generations. The floor of the first upper level had no carpet and no trace of household items. The lime-washed walls were peeling, and patches of dirty green moss were emitting a damp, moldy smell. I tried to appear unconcerned with anything unrelated to my task, but I couldn't forget the warning from that girl, even though I had dismissed it earlier. I also paid attention to my two companions. Ferguson appeared to be a grumpy, scowling man, but from the few words he spoke, I could guess he was an English farmer. Finally, Colonel Stark stopped at a low, unlocked door. Inside was a narrow, square room so small that the three of us couldn't enter at the same time. Ferguson stood outside while the colonel led me in. "We," the colonel said, "are now standing in the hydraulic press machine. If someone were to start the machine, It would not be pleasant at all. The ceiling of this small room is the underside of the piston, and it comes down onto this metal floor with considerable pressure. Outside, there are some small horizontal water pipes. After receiving the pressure, the water will transmit and increase the pressure in the way you already know. This machine is very easy to operate, but when it runs, it's not very smooth and wastes some pressure. Please examine it carefully and tell us how to fix it. I took the lamp from his hand and carefully examined the machine. Indeed, this enormous machine could generate extreme pressure. However, when I went outside and pulled down the control lever, I heard a hissing sound and immediately knew there was a small gap in the machine. Upon inspection, I discovered that the Indian rubber ring on the control lever head had contracted, making it unable to fully seal the moving lever. This was clearly the cause of the pressure loss. I told the two men about this issue. They both listened attentively, then asked some practical questions, especially about how to repair the machine. After discussing the details with them, I returned to the main room of the machine. To satisfy my curiosity, I carefully observed that small room. Just one look was enough to realize that the story about Clay was completely false. To think that a machine with such great capacity would be installed for such a trivial purpose was absurd and ridiculous. The walls of the room were made of wood, but on the steel floor were large grooves. I began to observe carefully and discovered that I mentioned that while the ceiling and floor were made of steel, the walls were wooden. As I was taking my final glance around, I suddenly noticed a faint yellow beam of light coming through a crack in the wooden wall. Then a wooden panel was pushed back, and the light grew clearer. In that moment, I could hardly believe this was my lifeline. I immediately rushed toward it, my soul trembling. The wooden panel closed behind me, but the shattering sound of the lamp and a moment later, the loud clash of two metal blocks showed that I had escaped a deadly danger by a hair's breadth. I was only brought to my senses when someone pulled my arm forcefully, and I discovered I was lying on the stone floor of a narrow corridor. The woman, holding a candle, was bending down, pulling me strongly with her left hand. She was none other than my kind friend from earlier. I had been so foolish not to heed her warning. "Quick! Quick!" she gasped. "They're coming up now! They'll discover you're not there! For heaven's sake, don't waste any more precious time! Hurry!" This time, at least, I listened to her warning. I staggered to my feet and ran after the girl, out of the corridor and down a spiral staircase. Below the staircase was a fairly wide corridor. Just as we reached it, we heard the sound of running footsteps and shouting from two people, one on the floor we were on and the other right below. The girl guiding me stopped, looking around in all directions like someone who had run out of escape routes. Then she pushed open a door into a bedroom, with moonlight dimly shining through the window. "This is your only chance," she urged. "It's high, but you can still jump down." Just as she was speaking, a light appeared at the end of the corridor. I saw the thin figure of Colonel Lysander Stark running very quickly, holding a lamp in one hand and a weapon resembling a butcher's cleaver in the other. I ran frantically into the room, pushed the window open, and looked outside. How peaceful, sweet, and vibrant the garden looked in the moonlight. From here to the ground was at least 10 meters. I climbed onto the windowsill but hesitated to jump right away, wondering what would happen to my lifesaver when the thug pursuing us arrived. If she were harmed, I would not fear danger and would return to help her. This thought had barely flashed through my mind when he ran to the door, trying to push her aside to get to me. But the girl held on to him tightly, using all her strength to hold him back. "Fritz! Fritz!" she cried out in English. "Remember your promise to me before. You promised you would never do this again. He won't tell anyone. For God's sake, he will certainly keep quiet." "You're mad, Elise," he roared, trying desperately to break free from her arms. "You'll ruin everything for us. He's seen too much already. Let me go." He pushed her aside, rushed to the window, and swung his weapon at me. By then, my body was already outside the window, but as he struck forcefully, my hands were still gripping the windowsill. I suddenly felt terrible pain and immediately let go, falling into the garden below. Though I fell rather hard, I was fortunately uninjured, landing in a low bush. I knew I wasn't yet out of danger, but just as I was about to run, I suddenly felt extremely tired and terribly dizzy. I looked at my painful hand that was twitching, and only then discovered that my thumb had been cut off, with blood continuously pouring from it. I tried my best to wrap the wound tightly with my handkerchief, but then my ears started ringing, and I fainted, falling into a rose bush. I don't know how long I was unconscious, certainly quite a while, because when I came to, the moon and stars had set, and the sun was rising in the east. My clothes were soaked with night dew, and my sleeve was drenched with blood from my thumb. Wound. The terrible pain from the wound immediately reminded me of last night's danger, and I suddenly realized I still hadn't escaped from those two villains. I scrambled to my feet and ran out of the corridor. But to my surprise, when I looked around, I couldn't see any house or garden at all. As it turned out, I was lying at the corner of a hedge by the main road, not far from a long building. When I went closer, I discovered it was the same train station I had arrived at the previous evening. If it weren't for the frightening wound on my hand, everything that had happened during those terrifying hours might have seemed just a nightmare. I entered the station, still feeling dizzy, and inquired about the morning train. I learned that a train would be leaving for Reading within the hour. I recognized the station attendant as the railway employee I had met when I arrived. I asked him if he had ever heard of Colonel Lysander Stark. The name seemed quite unfamiliar to him. I asked if he had noticed the carriage waiting for me last night. He said no. I asked if there was a police station nearby. He said there was one 3 miles away. For me, in my state of pain and fatigue, 3 miles was too far. I decided I would report to the police after returning to town. I got back to town just after 6 o'clock, so I first went to have my wound bandaged. Fortunately, this doctor here brought me to you. I entrust this case to you and will do everything entirely, according to your wishes. After hearing this extraordinary story, we both sat motionless for a long while. Then Sherlock Holmes took down one of the old and faded notebooks in which he kept newspaper clippings from the shelf. Here's an advertisement that might interest you, Holmes said. It appeared in all the papers a year ago. Let me read it to you. Missing, Jeremiah Haling, 26 years old, hydraulic engineer. After leaving his rented apartment at 10 o'clock on the evening of the 9th of this month, there has been no news of him. He was wearing... Aha! I think the colonel had to overhaul his machine once before. Good Lord, my patient exclaimed. That explains what the woman said, without a doubt. Clearly, the colonel is a cold-blooded butcher who won't let anything stand in the way of his plans, just like pirates who never leave any survivors on the ships they plunder. Every moment is extremely precious now, so if you feel up to it, we will go immediately to Scotland Yard to report this case. This is our first step toward Iford. About 3 hours later, we were on a train departing from Reading, heading for the small Berkshire village. The group included Sherlock Holmes, the hydraulic engineer, Inspector Bradstreet from Scotland Yard, a plainclothes policeman, and myself. Bradstreet spread a military map of the county on the seat and drew a circle with Iford as the center. This is it, he said. The circle has this village as its center with a radius of 10 miles. The place we need to find must be near this circle. I remember you said it was 10 miles. The carriage drove for about an hour. Do you think they brought you back from that far while you were unconscious? I think they must have done that. I have a vague feeling as if I was lifted up and carried somewhere. What I can't understand, I said, is why they spared you when they found you lying unconscious in the garden. Could it be that the villain softened at the girl's pleading? I think that's unlikely. I've never in my life seen anyone with such a cold face. Oh, we'll soon clarify everything, Bradstreet said. Look, I've finished drawing the circle. Now I just wish we knew exactly which point on the circle it is. I think I can point it out, Holmes said in a calm, relaxed manner. Really? Right. Now? The inspector exclaimed. You must have deduced something. Well, good. Let's see who among us agrees with you. I think it's to the south because that countryside is very remote. I say it's to the east, my patient ventured cautiously. I think it's to the west, the plainclothes policeman disagreed. It's very isolated there. I lean toward the north, I added my opinion, because there are no mountains there, and our friend mentioned that he noticed the carriage didn't go uphill at all. Well, the inspector laughed, what a range of different opinions. Whose side do you take, Holmes? You're all wrong. Impossible. Oh, yes, all wrong. Look here. Holmes pointed his finger at the center of the circle. This is where we'll find them. What about the 12-mile journey? Hatherley asked, mouth agape. 6 miles there, 6 miles back. Nothing could be simpler. Didn't you say yourself that when you got into the carriage, the horse looked very energetic, with a glossy coat? If it had really run 12 miles on such difficult roads, how could it look like that? Indeed, this could be a trick, Bradstreet remarked cautiously. Of course, there's no doubt about the villain's true nature. Certainly, Holmes agreed. They are large-scale counterfeiters, using that machine to cast alloys to substitute for silver. We've previously discovered a gang of counterfeiters, the inspector said. They've produced a lot of counterfeit coins. We chased them to Reading but lost their trail. They've done everything to conceal their whereabouts, proving they're seasoned criminals. But now, with this golden opportunity, how can they escape? The inspector was mistaken. Those criminals did not surrender to the law. When our train arrived at Ayford Station, we saw a large column of smoke billowing up from behind a nearby small village, the smoke resembling the feathers of a giant ostrich suspended in the rural sky. A house fire? Bradstreet asked as the train left the station. Yes, sir, the station master replied. When did the fire break out? They say it's been burning since night, sir, but the fire is getting more intense. The entire building is engulfed in flames now. Whose house is it? It's Dr. Becker's house, sir. Tell me, the engineer interjected, is Dr. Becher a German, thin, with a long hooked nose? The station master laughed. Oh, no, sir. Dr. Becher is English, and in our parish, no one wears a waistcoat as fine as his. But as far as I know, he does. Live with someone else, a foreign patient. But it seems if you're hoping to dry out that catch, you won't get much fat from it. The station master was still saying something lengthy. We didn't hear it all as we hurriedly ran toward the burning house. This road led to the top of a low hill. Before us appeared a long, white-painted building. Every window and crack was belching. Bright red flames. Several fire engines in the front garden were trying in vain to extinguish the fire. This is it! Hatherley cried out excitedly. Look at this gravel path. Over there is the rose bush where I fell. That second window is where I jumped out. Well then, Holmes said, at least you've had your revenge. No doubt when crushed by that machine, your oil lamp set fire to the wooden walls. Too excited in pursuing you, they didn't notice the fire at that time. Now open your eyes wide and see if your friends from last night are among these people. Though I fear they've already fled more than 100 miles away. Holmes's foresight proved correct. From that night until now, no one has heard anything about the beautiful woman, the sinister German or the scowling Englishman. Early that morning, a farmer had seen a carriage carrying several people and some large, heavy boxes speeding toward Reading. But where those evildoers went afterward, no one knows. Even Holmes, as intelligent as he is, couldn't discover even a small clue related to them. The firefighters were surprised to find many strange objects in the house and struggled to explain them. What amazed them most was finding someone's freshly severed thumb at a second-floor window. It wasn't until sunset that they managed to control the fierce fire, but the roof had been burned and collapsed, and the entire scene had become a pile of ashes and ruins. Therefore, apart from some iron pipes and gas cylinders, the hydraulic press, for which my unfortunate friend had paid such a high price, left no trace whatsoever. We discovered a lot of nickel and tin in an outbuilding, but we didn't find even a single metal coin. This was enough to prove the significance of the large, very heavy boxes mentioned earlier. If not for the soft ground leaving fairly clear traces, we might never have known how the hydraulic engineer was removed from the garden. It was clear that he had been lifted by two people. One had very small footprints, while the other's footprints were terribly large. In conclusion, perhaps the quiet Englishman wasn't as evil as his accomplice. He had helped the girl carry the victim out of danger. When we returned on the train to London, the hydraulic engineer was gloomily lamenting his fate. "Oh, this was truly an unlucky business for me. I lost my thumb, lost 50 guineas in payment. What did I gain?" "Experience," Holmes said with a laugh. "You must understand. This is something truly valuable. Once this story spreads, you will certainly gain a good reputation in your future life and work."